when you embark on whatever journey that has risk, it's even more important to know your why, because there are moments where in the gamified politics that we live in, it's really easy to be caught up in the game, to say, oh, okay, I'm going to be this, I'm going to have that small town story because it'll set me up better for the next run, right? As opposed to actually right now is the moment. What story do I want to tell at this very moment? And really leans on the why I did it to begin with.
Today's guest is Amanda Renteria, the CEO of Code for America, where she champions initiatives that include strengthening the social safety net and supporting local anti-poverty initiatives. Amanda was the first Latina chief of staff in the U.S. Senate and served as the national political director during Secretary Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. And now, here are your hosts, Mildred Otero and Taylor Stewart.
Hello, and welcome to the Leaders Table. We're not here to talk about titles or CVs, but to explore the moments that shape leadership. As you know, it's those raw, real experiences that don't always make it into the spotlight. I'm Mildred Otero, president of Lee.
And I'm Taylor Stewart, Vice President of Platforms at Lee. Mildred, I am so excited about the episode today.
I am so excited as well. Thank you, Taylor. Today, we're sitting with a very dear friend and leader that I've admired for years, Amanda Renteria, the CEO of Code for America, who has been on a remarkable leadership journey. Thanks for being here, Amanda. We're so excited to chat with you.
I'm excited just to be here with you guys, hanging out, we don't do this enough. So I appreciate that we're doing it in this forum.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we like to begin at the beginning here on this podcast. So could you tell us about where you come from? What's the place or experience that has shaped who you are?
Yeah, well, I always appreciate, I kind of start almost even every interview or when I meet someone and people talk about my work, I say, I can't start this without telling you about my roots because it's why I'm here and it's why I do the things I do. And so I grew up in the Central Valley of California. It is between Fresno and Bakersfield, so not a place people talk about a lot. It's rural America. The thing that people should know about it is we grow some of the most diverse crops in the country and have one of the highest levels of production. In fact, in certain areas, we're the number one producer, which means I grew up in farm country. My parents were farm workers. That's how we ended up there, is in a labor camp. And their story of coming here, believing in the American dream. My dad is a Mexican immigrant. My mom was actually born in Santa Ana. And they found themselves on in the same communities that really built out the ag community in California. And so that has shaped me because I'm from not just a small town, but I like to say I'm from this place of hopes and dreams that seemed impossible at one time for my parents. And so I feel super blessed to not only be able to continue their stories, their desires for the world, but I also come from a reality of what it's like to grow up in the lowest income congressional district in the state of California and among the 10th lowest income across the country. That has shaped my work and the importance of government, the importance of really being able to connect people to where I'm from, and why I believe in democracy and public institutions and all the things that we try and work on at Code for America. So I like to start my story there. I'm not sure if that's enough. You want me to go more or what other questions you all have?
That is more than enough, and we will get into even more. We've talked about this as like people and places. So you've told us a little bit about place. Now we'd love to hear about a person. So who has been the most important influence in your life? And what key lessons did they pass on?
Yeah, this is always a hard question for me because I feel like I was one of those like rascal kids, like all over the place, right? And on the one hand, it was my abuelita and her example of like I'd, rustle around the house and I would find her writing checks. And right beneath the writing checks, she was practicing like 71, 72, 70, how to like write in English, cursive, the whole bit. And so in some ways that really formed me. Like I can do anything. I mean, my grandmother learned how to like drive and write and do checks and, all those kinds of things, learn the language. And so that sort of from the beginning was you just got to figure this stuff out because my abuelita did with kids. Her husband had left and she figured out how to have her own house. And so that really shaped me. But in general, I think when you grow up in a small town, you kind of feel like you're born of everyone. And so in some ways, it wasn't just my abuelita, but then it was my coaches who said, Mama's pretty good. She can like play sports. Like, why couldn't she play in college? And so it was my coaches. And then it was my teachers that when I got into Stanford and I wasn't sure whether I was going to go to Stanford or whether I was going to go to a nearby Christian college that was closer to home for my parents, it really was a teacher who pulled me aside. And at that point, we had never had a woman or a Latina get into Stanford. And he pulled me aside and he's like, you've got to go. We need someone like you to be successful at a place like that. Mm-hmm. And that really made me understand the responsibility that I had to make sure that wherever I go, I am bringing all those folks along with me because they've shaped me all throughout the way. And, and even when I think about getting into the United States Senate and some of the different experiences I've had, I've been shaped by seeing and helping and watching folks like Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan or Hillary Clinton during the presidential campaign or Dianne Feinstein, my first job on the Hill. And so it's really interesting or Becerra, Javier Becerra here in California when he was Attorney General. The opportunity to help and learn at the same time in my adult career has also really shaped me.
Thank you, Amanda. What is one surprising thing most people don't know about you?
It's interesting because I feel like I come from a lot of different worlds. And so oftentimes people are a little surprised when, this is kind of funny because they kind of bump up against each other. So I, in some ways, think of myself as a translator of things. And so I play pickup ball with the boys, have for a very long time. And I think they're always a little surprised when I'm like, when they ask the question, like, if you weren't playing ball, because clearly you love playing ball, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? And I'm like, well, salsa dancing, of course. And so, and my salsa dancing friends, especially when I was younger, didn't know my basketball friends. I mean, two different worlds. Or, when I think about driving into the Senate, there were literally like 2 trucks in the Senate that would come in. And I was one of those trucks that would come in because I was from rural America. So of course I'm going to have a truck in Washington, D.C. And so the divide of like, when all of a sudden I run into somebody, I'm like, no, I understand rural America. Like, I'm from that. And they're like, what? But we've seen you here in Washington, D.C. or you lived in New York. So I think the surprising part has always been the other side of my world. That's what makes sort of life interesting for me, is I like being that translator because I get to live in different worlds and then do my best to try and figure out how do we bridge these different worlds, because we're the same in a lot of ways and want the same sort of dreams and hopes. We just don't live in the other spaces very often.
I love that. A quick follow-up to that, Amanda. I feel like I've known you for a long time. I'm thinking of first Latina chief of staff in the Senate and some of the roles that you've had across so many different and important work. Public service is a big word. What does it mean for you? And if you've had a chance, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone starting out in this space?
I oscillate between thinking public service is a big word and that it's equally as small. Right. It's equally like, what am I doing in my community to, like, when you're walking down the street and you pick up trash near the school, right? That is equally important in our day, that we're thinking about how are we helping our community. And at the same time, I also think about it like I wouldn't be where I was if there wasn't Title IX for sports, as an example, because that helped me figure out how to pay for college. I wouldn't be where I was if we didn't have immigration policy at a different time than right now, but immigration policy that allowed someone like my dad to build his small business here. And so what I think is even more important, and I've spent a lot of my career, like any kind of advice or mentoring I do, I'm always trying to tell people you got to spend some time in public service because it gives you a grounding in our world, in our country, and to remind you that everyone has a voice when you think about public service more broadly. The story I give right now of why public service, because it feels uncertain, it feels scary. People are seeing folks resign from these honored positions. And I think we are at a time where public service, government is being redefined. And now is the time to enter. I'm almost jealous that I'm not starting my career right now, because I think we are in a tug of war of what it means. But that means that everyone gets a shot to pull on that rope one way or another, and to get to redefine it right now in ways that is more open than ever before. And so my advice is jump in now. And then my other piece is, no matter when you jump in, don't forget why you're jumping in. Don't forget why you felt it was important to pick up that piece of trash, or why it was important to run for office, or why it was important to lead an office, as a chief of staff or as a leader of, let's say, healthcare advisory or whatever people are doing. And I think, I have seen folks come in and get blinded by the big lights or the big white columns in Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden think about it as the game. But what I hope is that when people think of public service, they don't think about it as a game, but they think about it as a true calling for why they entered the place to begin with.
I found that sometimes over time as a leader, the why doesn't change so much as it grows and it expands. Can you tell us a little bit about what fired you up early in your career and what motivates you today?
I've always sort of, like I said, thought about my small town as, how do I help? How do I have the kind of policies that I don't have to be a first, that everyone can do this, right? Everyone can see themselves going to a Stanford if they want to. Everyone can see themselves owning a business someday. Everyone can see themselves as, that expert, skilled, whatever they want to be. That has continued to inspire me. So in some ways, when I left my hometown and really was trying to figure it out at Stanford, the thing that motivated me over and over again is thinking about what my teacher said about, we got to prove we can do it here. But equally, for what? Why do I have to prove that? And why does it matter? And I think when I worked in the financial industry for a while, right out of college, I had to figure it out. I had to figure out capital markets. My dad always said, follow the money, mija. And so that was my thing. I followed the money when I graduated, both in terms of how to make ends meet, following the money, but also really learning about how Goldman Sachs works, about how money works in this country. And then I went home to a basketball game. My mom's sitting next to her comadre, and she says, so, what's your daughter doing now? In a nice little whisper. And my mom's like, well, she works kind of at a bank, kind of like a bank teller. And I remember just, it wasn't what she said, and I didn't need her to know what I was doing at Goldman or what it meant to be in that kind of bank versus a retail bank. But, you could hear your mom's voice when, I don't know, there was a missing sense of pride in it, right? That I was doing this thing, but it had no real connection to where I was from or why I went to Stanford in the first place. And so that for me was a big aha, oh, wait a second. Not only do I want my mom proud, but it linked me back to, as I'm sitting in this high school gym, my old high school gym, why did I ever leave? And did I let go of that somewhere? And that is when I left Goldman and came back home to teach and coach, in many ways to find my roots again and find what I was supposed to be doing. So my first public service job was actually a high school teacher in my hometown, which is when I fell in love with it, when I realized this is the thing I want to do at scale. And that's really what led me to government, was public service at scale.
Wow.
As I mentioned earlier, you are a leader that has had so many amazing and remarkable roles in different areas. One thing that I'm always curious of our more senior leaders is failure is a tough teacher. Can you share a time where it really shaped you and something you might not have learned otherwise?
Yeah. So when I ran for Congress in my hometown or in my home district, I didn't win. I won the primary, didn't win the general election. And it's really in the knowing you're going to lose where I sort of learned my lesson. So it was in this moment of, we could see the numbers, we could see what was happening across the country at the time. I think there was only one Democrat that won that year. And there was this moment where they showed me the data right before some of our main buys on commercials were going to come out. And we were talking through the narrative, and it was super clear to me that the numbers weren't there to win. But you're sitting there going, but what ad do we show? There were two options. I could be Amanda, small town girl athlete who, goes big in D1, that kind of story. Or I could be Amanda, daughter of an immigrant father, daughter of farm workers, went to Stanford and fulfilled her parents' dreams kind of thing. And I went with that second because that's why I had run. I wanted to prove to the places that I grew up and the way I grew up that you really can achieve these things. I wanted to be that picture for people, even if I didn't win, so that young kids could see that and be that, right? They could finally see something that didn't exist before. And so for me, I was sad that that image wasn't going to win. And it was so clear to me that the right answer was to be exactly who I am, because it could inspire other folks who grew up like me or who largely felt invisible if you were in the Central Valley. If you're the daughter of farm workers, it's very different than being the daughter of farmers. And I wanted to prove that no matter which daughter you are, you can do it. And so I take with me that when you embark on whatever journey that has risk, it's even more important to know your why, because there are moments where, especially what in the gamified politics that we live in, it's really easy to be caught up in the game, to say, oh, okay, I'm going to be this, I'm going to have that small town story because it'll set me up better for the next run, right? As opposed to actually right now is the moment. What story do I want to tell at this very moment? And really leans on the why I did it to begin with.
I love that. And you've come back to that knowing your why a few different times. And I think our why is often grounded in our values. So I would love to hear about a time when you were pulled in different directions with your own values and that they were in tension. How did you navigate that tension?
After losing my congressional race, there were two choices. The community really wanted me to consider a state Senate seat that was going to open up, where I could really utilize the name recognition that I had had to run for state Senate. And at the same time, Hillary Clinton called to say, will you be my national political director? And it's a pull I feel often, which is, when do you stay close to home and make that path where you're digging in more, versus when do you go out and go broad, right? And that really tugged at different values of mine, right? My mom and dad are there. My whole family's there. Like, Mika, you're back. Your kids are young. We get to be there. Versus that small rural town, versus going to New York, living in Brooklyn, taking my kids out of there. And I really struggled with it. And I ended up going to New York with my kids like third school at this point. And the reason is, while those are both important values of being close to home and doing what you can for those right in front of you versus, sort of a long-term play, that's how I made it. I thought about the kids I had. They were young, super young at the time. And I was like, which one is going to help their world look and be different for them? And I thought, if we could elect the first woman ever as president, my daughter would see herself in that. The world would open up to new kinds of leadership. And so I went that route, but it's one that was hard. It was hard for my parents that we were upending. And it was hard for me to know that I was, leaving home again.
I'm curious, just following up on that, who's been a voice or a presence that has helped guide you when the path isn't clear?
I always appreciate this question because I feel like I've been on a handoff to different people.
That's good to hear.
Because I've been in so many different worlds, right? And so, when I first get to Goldman and I have my bosses there who are teaching me, and I remember walking in and they were like, I was like, okay, I don't know this world. I don't go to cloth napkin restaurants. Like, what do I do, right? And I had colleagues who were like, here's a book you have to read. But what I'll say along the way is, my family is super core to who I am. My extended family, my two sisters are my best friends. They remind me that I'm just, that little troublemaking traviesa when I was younger. But they have obviously always been there for me. But I'll say I've built really strong relationships at different times where I've been helped and guided in ways that I am so thankful for. I mean, one that really comes for me is Debbie Stabenow. I was legislative director and working for her. And then the chief of staff role opened up, and I came in and I had a whole presentation about why I could be a chief of staff, even though I was like super young at the time. I wasn't from Michigan, so I was quite different. And I remember she's just like, Amanda, like, this is your job. Like, you can do this. And like, so it was almost as though she saw through my own wonder, even though I was like, presenting with confidence. That was pretty cool. And then when I think about Hillary, and we were presenting to the time a group of, it was like a combination of union and advocacy leaders. And I said, I was really honored to be there. And afterwards, she's like, you're not honored. You deserve to be there. And it was really interesting because, it's a way to humble ourselves. And especially I feel like I grew up like making sure I don't be too big, like make sure you don't come across as arrogant. And I remember her saying that, and it was really just a different view of there are times when you've got to show up in different ways to understand who the audience is and why it's like that. And so it was really interesting to see someone like Hillary Clinton say, hold on a second, you're not honored or humbled, like this is where you belong. I take those lessons away being like someone took the time to give me feedback when they didn't have to. Mm-hmm. And so I try my best to do the same, even if it's tough feedback, because I think that is what makes you learn and grow. And so I feel like I've gotten a lot of feedback over my time from my different bosses, but I want it. I want to learn and be different. I know I come from different worlds, and that's kind of been my thing, whether it was a financial industry or education or policy or politics and now tech.
At Lee, we say feedback is a gift. So we believe in feedback.
Deeply. Amanda, getting to talk to you here, you have a real energy and joy to you. I would love to know, what is it that is bringing you joy in your work?
I really love the people I'm working with. And I think there's nothing more magical than working with really great people trying to do good in the world. Like, I know that's a gift, that we wake up going, how do we make people's lives better, even in the hard times? And I feel super grateful for being able to do that and being able to have around me the kind of people that care about things. But I'll also say we at Code for America, and a lot of my roles, it's a heavy responsibility, and you could kind of get lost in how heavy it is, right? We see what it's going to mean when people lose SNAP. We've been in the moments of crisis where, people on the Rio Grande Valley lose their Medicaid, and what that means for those families and those kids who can't get their annual exam. And I think the only way we sustain ourselves, or at least one of the things that I try as a leader, is to remind ourselves of the simple silliness of life itself. Because if we don't have that, it's hard to show up every day and really be there in the hard moments. And so I think that's where it comes from. But honestly, I feel super lucky in life by the people that I'm around, by the experiences I've had. And I think, especially in my job, that I get to choose my job, right? Not a lot of people have that opportunity. My parents didn't have that opportunity when they first started out. And so if I'm not joyous in what I'm doing, that's my fault. So I do my best to remind myself of that, and then to make sure to inject that as a leader too.
I love that. I'm curious, Amanda, if there is anything that you've read lately or heard, a podcast or something that helped to shift your thinking.
Right now, I think a lot about the 1920s. I also think a lot about the Hoover and FDR trade-off and what was happening during that period of time. And that has really shaped how I think about it. On an ongoing basis, I read or I listen to like Reid Hoffman's Possible, right, where he talks about what's happening in AI, because I kind of want to know the contemporary thinking and what's happening out in the world, and at the same time grounding in history at a time where Hoover was known for modernization. I'm very interested in the modernization moment of time where all of a sudden, there was thousands of bricks, and Hoover came in and was like, nope, we're only going to have this many bricks, right? Where auto parts were all over the place. And he really standardized that such that we can have a modern manufacturing industry. But as he was doing that, he forgot an important element, that you cannot modernize without thinking about real people. And that missing characteristic is really what led to the rise of FDR, creating programs for people. And I think and read a lot about that time, like what were the things that they were doing, because I don't think we need that trade-off. I think we can modernize in this world. We see it at Code for America when we do food assistance programs, where you can modernize in a way that takes into account what people are dealing with at their kitchen table.
Right.
And so I've been spending my time really thinking about that trade-off, as well as the 1920s, where that period of time looked really bleak. But it's also when you had the rise of unions and NAACP and these institutions that really led the future. And so my routine listenings are what's happening today so I can understand the contemporary times. But my deep research, my free time research is like going deep when I read an article in the New York Times, or I've watched the History Channel again for a period of time. I'm like, you know what? I want to learn more about that particular segment. How did unions rise? How did the NAACP rise? And what I wish there was more out there is the how. So what I love what you're doing is really talking to folks about like, no, tell me what real leadership is like, right? And I wish I could go back in those moments and have these kinds of same conversations with FDR or Hoover at the time to be like, no, how did you modernize? And what was missing in that moment? Why didn't you talk to real people? So I try my best to like research that.
Yeah, and speaking of going back and talking to someone, if you could go back and speak to your 23-year-old self, what would you say?
This is a funny question because I sometimes feel like I'm still 23.
Touche, Amanda. Touche.
I am still figuring this thing out, man. But I think that the things I was learning at 23. I remember doing these PowerPoint slides for these, big meetings that my bosses was having, right? And I read through them. So I was always late. Like I was always there really late at night doing work, but it was because I was like reading what was on the fax machine. I was like studying what they were studying, and I didn't need to. But I also now realize, looking back, at what a privilege that was, that when you're in those roles, those entry-level roles, you get to learn so much if you're just watching and learning. And so I wish I knew how valuable that was, because maybe I would have done it better. Maybe I would have taken better notes.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I've lost that 23-year-old curiosity as well as humility, especially because over the course of my career, I've just been in so many different places that I feel like I return to that 23-year-old making copies, but it's harder to really peer into things when you come in at that C-suite or that executive level.
It's so interesting. I was thinking, is there a habit, a tool, or a mindset that you swear by these days? Sort of back to this, if you could go, back, but also we love to inspire young people to think about the types of roles that you've had over your life, Amanda, and leading an organization now. Like, what are the habits or the tools or mindsets that you rely on?
The most important is to stay curious. I really do try and kind of dive in and learn and assume I don't know. And one of the things I try to do, and this is why I love running or getting exercise, is I do want to free my mind from the moment I'm living in. And I have been much more intentional with the chaos that's happening. Try to say, okay, Amanda, you're not living in today's crisis. Imagine you're living 5 years from now. Imagine you're living 3 years from now. And really do that. Even when it's hard. I've now sort of employed this with my team too. And I've always done this in life in general. When I was on the Hill, I did it, even though it always felt like the same over the 10 years. I felt like it gave us an advantage to be really thinking about what do things look 3 years from now or 4 years from now. And so it's not like a daily routine as much as it's definitely every year. In fact, my husband and I used to have an annual, marriage report. How are we doing? What are the 3 things that bother you? And what are the 3 things and let's just fix it, turn off the lights, put your laundry away. But I do think it's important to have those moments of both check-in at the moment, but also expansion of a future. The other thing that I've done throughout the course of my life is I try to do something new every year. I mean, I took singing classes. I learned how bad I was, right? But that sense of humility and then that sense of discovery, and then to some degree, I mean, I didn't get this in singing, but to some degree, that level of achievement. right? So whether it was like, I did tap dance, I was a Mexican dancer. So tap dancing was a whole different world, but I figured it out. And that has really kept me, just my mind open, my creativity open.
I love that. Just kind of expanding on that question, I'd be curious to know what's something new that you are learning about right now or learning how to do.
So AI, right? Like, I think this is true, but building my own app right now, having an app that will tell me all about the latest of AI, but building it myself because you can characterize or you could put the criteria of what you want it to pull from and why. And then making sure it stays there, right? So some of this is interesting because it's building it myself, but it's also then teaching me what this is about as well. The other thing more physically I started last year is learning how to row. My son's a rower in crew, and I don't know anything about rowing, but I'm like, I could do that. And so at the beginning, he was super making fun of me. Now, like, I have a good form.
Amanda, I sort of want to just probe a little bit more, just as you're leading in this space. What is something that you, like a leader that you admire? Doesn't have to be anybody famous. What is a leader that you look to and you feel like you learn from and you grow with?
I love, love, love to read people's speeches. I love reading Obama's speeches. I love reading Martin Luther King's speeches, right? And it's funny because over time, Eleanor Roosevelt has some beautiful things that she put out, but over time they look different, even though it's the same speech. Like, they have different kind of meaning, and I love it because, and the reason why I think specifically about these incredible people who spoke at these moments of time is because it's language that relates to people, right? It was written so that it would relate to people. I do think about Francis Perkins in the depths of the Great Depression going to Congress and saying, we need to make sure that nobody faces poverty in their older age. I mean, remarkable to go and make that claim, right? And it's not just what she said, but then learning how she said it, right? She shows up not with like some sort of speech, but with like a purse filled with letters and starts reading those letters. Like, I know now we do that, you see politicians do that, but I am just imagining her coming in with a purse, opening it up and being like, let me tell you, right? I mean, such beautiful things like that. Cory Booker's speech on the floor, there were it was a long speech, obviously, because he was, on the floor for so long, but there were parts of that thing that I'm like, I want to hold on to this. So I really look up to, I think it's more people in moments. What they did, what they said, how they gave either comfort, joy, or inspiration at a moment. And really, because those are sort of the courageous moments where there's not necessarily, the right like words written on paper for you. They have to figure it out often in the moment to find a path forward.
You are incredibly thoughtful about leadership. And one of the things I often hear from other leaders who I admire always remind me that leaders have to decide. I would love to know your process in making decisions, the kind of how you do it. Are there any rituals that you come back to whenever you're making a tough decision?
I have learned more and more, especially as I'm, older, that like I have a decent gut, and being able to like quiet stuff to listen to that gut is sometimes the most important. And I have awesome teammates, and that's what I was talking about before. We've built a wonderful team, and I feel like I've been really lucky to have been on amazing teams. And so you let them hear them out, fully hear them out, probe questions. I think my reputation is that I ask very intense questions. And so, but they're super smart. And so I do my best to like have the super smart people tell me what they think, right? All across the board. And oftentimes it is competing. And then, I turn off Zoom and I sit in the quiet moment and I go, okay, like, what does your gut say? And sometimes I go back and I'll ask, sometimes I'll reach out to a mentor and I'll be like, here's my gut on this thing. Like, let me tell you the story. Here's my gut. Is this right? And so on the one hand, while I believe in my gut, I also double check it, whether that's with my board or somebody that's really close or adjacent, like a peer CEO, to say, here's how I'm thinking about this. Is this right? So I've done fewer gut calls now where I'm checking it. And especially when we're indexing for speed in a world that's moving much faster right now, I have found that I built that muscle, and that really is what helps me. But it's very grounded in the fact that I have really good teams, because without the information, your gut doesn't matter, right? And so it does really need both.
Amanda, outside of work, what parts of yourself do you think make you the leader that you are? I have another piece to that, which is that sometimes it's not the job title, but it's the things that we carry with us.
I think it's the all of it for me. I do. I feel like it's the responsibility that I feel coming from the places I come from. It's the training that I've had both in education, in the jobs I've had, that has helped me sort of navigate uncertainty. And then it's, I think the joy I have from being with family. When my daughter has a hard time or my son is like, Mom, I just had a hard day. Like, our thing is we'll cuddle on the couch and we'll watch the Jetsons. And I remember, I think for me, that was like, that's what I did with my dad. Like, we would like sit on Sunday, like right after church, like there were the comics, there was the silliness, right? And I think it's kind of a little bit of all of that. Like, I don't believe in this world where, again, because I get to choose my job, I don't believe in this world where my job and my personal life are different. I believe we're better if they're more combined. And I get the privilege of being able to combine them. And I think that's what I bring as a leader, is I really am who I am when I'm at work or when I'm at home with my dad on the couch watching the Jetsons.
I love that. Thank you so much, Amanda. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I just think your honesty and honestly your openness and your reflections are going to mean a lot to everyone who is going to listen to this episode. So thank you for sharing so much of yourself today.
Well, I'm excited to be with you, and we have to do it more often for sure.
I would love that, because it is definitely these conversations that remind us that leadership is all the things. It's complex. It is human. And that for everyone who is tuning in, I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And remember, leadership is just as much about the questions as the answers. So thank you all for tuning in. Take care until next time.
Thank you for listening to The Leaders Table. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about Lee, you can visit us online at wearelee.org.